Hello and welcome to another episode of the Backdoor Cup podcast. We are joined by the great Maurice Brosnan, Irish sports writer with the Irish Examiner today. And we are going to go into depth around all the games in Division 1, as well as the rule changes or rule enhancements, and Maurice's feelings around how we might be touching those up or making them a little bit more positive. We also cover Fermanagh's draw with Sligo, and we go into detail on all the games. So hopefully you enjoy it. And now onto the podcast. Lads, welcome back to another episode, a special episode of the Backdoor Cup podcast. You will know, all the listeners, that this is not Owen McCabe on the end. Maurice, welcome to the Backdoor Cup podcast.
Thanks for having me, lads. Yeah, I've been a long admirer of what you're trying to do here.
Appreciate it, man. First journalist that we've had on and the first guest that we've had on all season. Is that right, Darragh?
I think so, aye.
Yeah.
Been slacking.
Yeah, it's
or no players just want to come on.
I think that's the main thing, because obviously there's a lot to get through today and there's been a lot of rule changes, but people are a little bit worried about speaking too soon, I suppose. So Darragh was the one that put into the group that maybe this guy would be a good guy to get on to talk about the changes and how they're going, or the enhancements. So I've been following what you've been doing. I've been having conversations with you over the last couple of years, but it's good to get an external perspective in to what we're doing as well. So from the outside looking in, how do you feel the Backdoor Cup podcast fills the gap in the GAA media?
Well, there's been a long bugbear of journalists in general. I know it can be tedious enough when you hear people complaining about it, about not hearing enough from players. So the fact that you've got active players willing to do this, I do think is like a genuine credit, and is something that we should hopefully, if we see more and see that there's no harm in it. Like it does definitely stand to the game for a bunch of different reasons. There's the elephant in the room, which is that the GAA as an association needs to mark its corner, that the best promotion we have are our players. Like that's the most important thing in this whole structure. And if we can promote them properly, then why not? And who else better to do it than them themselves? And then there's a broader thing too, which is that you can, if you give people your story, like I'm not saying you have to expose yourself entirely, but no more than what you do on social media or something like this, it definitely does give you an association with a player. And I honestly do believe this. People, like generally looking in, are willing to give people more leeway when they actually know the person. Like you're more willing to. I think it's a lot harder to be overly critical or go absolutely to town on a fella when you know how much he's putting into it, or you know his backstory and stuff like that as well. So I honestly do think it's win-win. I know people will accuse me of it. Sure, suits our industry to do this, but have you ever seen an empty page? Like papers will fill it with something. So why not let that be your own story? And in a lot of cases, there's some really good stories there. So if this is the start, hopefully, of something that we start to see a shift, I don't know if it will, but if it is, I would wholeheartedly welcome that.
And it's the easiest way to control the narrative, I suppose, is to come on and chat about it. And when we have you on every week, generally from your first couple of words, we can tell whether the result has been good or bad at the weekend, because it does affect you. So a positive result this weekend, let's say, and for the last couple of weeks. And when I met you in the cafe outside, I said, geez, you're in good form. Am I?
Yeah, I suppose, and the first thing I said to you, well, it's mixed emotions from the weekend. So on one side of it, we were 7 points down in the 65th minute. So the game looked gone, people were leaving and everything. To pull that back and actually draw the game, it was mayhem at the end, and it was an exciting finish, and something I think we brought something for the fans, even in Fermanagh, to hold on to and come back to, which is something I kind of took from it. But as a team, our goal at the start of the year was promotion, and we probably did need to win that game. So it was yes, the point could be huge come the end, because if you lose that game, you're in a relegation battle. But on the other side, we set that standard for ourselves. We want to reach Division 2. So yeah, it was kind of mixed emotions, I suppose, as I mentioned, and it's not completely gone promotion now, but it's extremely unlikely, especially after Clare beating Kildare yesterday. They would need to lose 2 out of the last 3, and we'd have to win both.
But even in the manner that you came back and levelled the game late on and got a draw or salvaged a draw out of it, it must almost seem like back to back you have 2 wins.
Yeah, I suppose it probably did. In the end up, because even as a player, when you're in the arena and you're 7 points down with a few minutes to go, naturally, like as a human, you're thinking, right, this is gone. Like but the big thing for us is like in previous years, when we went 7, 8, 9 down, we would end up losing by 15. So there's definitely character in the team this year. We've probably shown that in a few games as well, where things haven't been going that well, and then we've pulled it back. Like we've went 5, 6 down in games and pulled it back and won the game. So that element is huge for us as well as a team, to know that we're growing that way, and that it's like that process focused mindset of just like, you just keep going. And the new rules probably played in our favour this weekend. Like, it was the 2-pointers means that you're still in the game. And I know people are arguing that like you're only in that position because the 2-point, like they probably kicked 2-pointers in the first half to get that lead, but it wasn't even really the case. I think they maybe had 1 or 2 2-pointers. They were just picking us off. And so without that 2-pointer in the game, that wouldn't have never happened for us to get back.
But just to touch on that before we move on, you can't turn off a football match now, really. Whereas previously, if a team was up by a lot, dropping everybody back and just killing the game, sometimes you could turn off the game at 50 minutes and say like, well, they have that one there now, so there's no point in watching the last 20. Whereas every game seems to be alive until the last kick. What do you think, Maurice? Yeah,
but I think it's inherent in how do we change the sport, in that you're going to have like kickouts. You watch games now, and that's, Mayo are absolutely destroying Kerry's kickout, and they're running away with it. Kerry come back on top, and it completely reverses. That's just the nature of it. So I think there's a challenge for teams in that you kind of make the most of when you're on top, and at the same time as well, make the most of when you're on top. When you have the wind, you really get after 2-pointers. So Galway have the wind against their own to go for 12 2-pointers in the first half. They kick 4, but it's just, you absolutely go to town on that while you can. So I don't think it's a drastic shift in what it was last year. Maybe slightly around the frills and stuff, but it probably is no harm either that you're not going to chew out of a game. The thing for me though, regardless of whether or not you're not going to turn off because teams are coming back, way harder to kill a game now. So you can't. Previously, how you'd manage those last 10 minutes, like you might take a lot of time off the clock. You might get it back to your goalkeeper, and you effectively be defensive in possession. Just maximize really slow, long phases. You can't do that anymore. So that's definitely encouraging, regardless of how teams are coming back. The fact that teams can't hold on is brilliant.
And if you remember that Dublin-Roscommon game 2 years ago, when Dublin just kept the ball for
6 minutes,
yeah, like you can still do that technically, but the key word in the GAA for the last couple of years is always jeopardy. And if you're doing that in the opposition half with your keeper up there's a lot of jeopardy on whether you turn over the ball as well. And if we look at the statistics, which we will later on, there's a great increase in the amount of turnovers in games. And
like I'm nearly sick of talking about the 12v11 thing. I think it's there's so many of these rules that I like. It's the one that I personally don't. And there's a couple of different things in it that are very positive. Like I watched the highlights of your game earlier. It's 15 points in the game. I think is Sean involved in 10 of them. Like in term, I mean, whether finishing them or he the assist for your point, he's coming forward. He's wants to want to kick out. So that's used as an attacking force, right? It's not necessarily as unpalatable. Like he's very clearly, you're working your overlap and you're making the most of it, and that's good coaching. You would give a lot of credit for that. But the thing that I don't want to see in the game, that I think the thing we're trying to get away from, is the inverse, which is that Meath go down to a black card against Down to bring up Billy Hogan, and they take 4 minutes off the clock by keep ball. Dublin against Kerry against the wind do the same thing. And if you look at any field sport in the world, like any invasion sport, the 3 things they want most are chaos, contests, and collisions. And if you want any rule change, it should be to promote that. Like that's at its. There's been a lot of talk this weekend about the essence of the game. Have we changed the game? And I'm sure we'll talk about Robbie Brennan's comments later. But as a principle, that's the stuff you're trying to promote. So if there's anything that mitigates against that, I'm wary of it. And I do think the 12-hour lesson is one of the reasons that I'm wary of it, because there's an element of risk for sure in what they're doing, but it's not enough for me. So it's the one that there's an FRC meeting tonight. We'll hear this week if they are going to make any changes. It's the one that I wouldn't be surprised to see if there is a change. I'm overwhelmingly positive about the process, but that is definitely the one that is sticking in my cross more of it.
Let's stay on that one though for
just
now.
On that one, like that was one thing that was extremely frustrating about the game at the weekend. Like we were 7-8 points down, and Sligo brought the keeper up and started to keep the ball for minutes, and there was nothing really we could do. We tried to push out, but when we pushed out, there was an overlap and they were creating score. But they must have kept the ball at one stage for 3 or 4 minutes and just popping it about. And it was second half, your legs were gone. So it wasn't a case of like, right, we're just going to chase and hunt down. Like, I remember big calves were going, everything was going. I was just standing there like, what are we going to do here? Like, and then they played around 3-4 minutes. And then eventually the keeper was the one who got the overlap and put it over the bar. And you're thinking, like, they had so much control there. And there was only so much we could do to really get that ball back. So it's one of those things, like, there's huge positives to it, but then that's the negative. Like,
so I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I disagree in regards to the 12v11, and I will tell you why I disagree. It is because we are trying to, from the outside looking in, give an advantage to the offense, to the attack all the time. In any invasion sport as well, the easiest way to give an advantage to the offense is to overload the offense. So I can see from a positive perspective how they didn't want to get rid of the keeper being involved, because we have all those teams that play with a keeper as an integral part of their offense, of their attack, getting up the field, getting on the ball. And even Ethan Rafferty's comments at the weekend, like, he is actually getting on the ball in order to allow his teammates to create one-on-ones and try to get away from their opponents. And then he is given the control to try and pick out kick passes. So I would say that a major issue is not in the 12v11, but in the black card rule, in that you have to keep the players up. I think if we brought it back, and I would be harsh, if the opposition are keeping the ball in your half, I would just say, well, tough shit, like, go get the ball off them. And I know that's tough to hear, but that's the nature of the game. The other reason I would be in favour of it is because I don't want to see those players that are impacting the game positively from nets coming out the field and spraying passes and taking them out of the game. Because I think if we get more chaotic and have more challenges and contests and 1v1, I think what we will see is we're going to see less kick passes because there's less opportunities to get free. Now, that's just my opinion, but that would be the reason that I keep it.
But and see, I think that's a very convincing case, like as strong a case as you can make for the rule. But you think about what Robbie Brennan said at the weekend, that we've changed the sport. It's not Gaelic football anymore, and I think that's a really interesting idea. Like, what is the thing we're striving for? What's the game that because people would struggle to articulate what's our final vision. Is there a game in your head, like, as an example, that was as good as Gaelic football can possibly be? For me, it's Kerry Tyrone 2005. Like, that's the game for me, if we could get as close to that. So and I'm very conscious, I'm speaking from my own perspective here. Like, the stuff that I love about Gaelic football, they did a public survey before the Football Review Committee introduced their new rules, and they asked people to rank their core skills. And I think 2 of the top 5 were goal scoring and long range shooting. And for me, that I would have scoring actually a lot lower. And I appreciate I'm in the minority in that. But the thing that I love about football is the physicality of it. Like, when you know more than like Tyrone hounding Kerry that day in Croke Park, which was just one of the most iconic images in the GAA. And so for Gaelic football, that I would like to see is that it's the sweet spot. It is, strategy and skill. It is physicality, which is a core part of our game. It is obviously key skills like catching and kicking. So how do we promote all of that? And for me, the way that we promote all that is by getting as close as possible to rewarding teams who want to go man on man everywhere. So the best game I've seen under the new rules, and I was in Celtic Park for Derry Kerry, which was a thriller, but it was a bit of a freak. You 1-2 scored in 30 seconds at the very end of the game, or 2 goals and a point scored in the last 30 seconds. It might distill your perception of it slightly. But Kerry Mayo on Saturday in Castlebar is the game. That's the game that I want to see. And the reason I want to see that game is because Mayo are hounding Kerry, and they're getting reward. When they're pressing them up the pitch, they're getting reward. So you're seeing high feeling in that game. Paddy Clifford had a sensational mark. Aidan O'Shea, 2 of them, like, these are, if you're watching AFL, these are speckies. Like, it was genuinely sensational. You're seeing incredible long range shooting. I'm sure you also saw Ryan O'Donoghue's sideline. David Clifford kicked a 2-pointer in the second half. And you're seeing pressing. So that you're seeing all these elements of it within the game. And the reason it's there is because Mayo can't go back to their goalkeeper. So they can't. So you're rewarding that core element of it, that we're getting as close as possible to what we want to see. Now, I genuinely don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if a solution that the FRC come up with this is that it's 11 versus 11. So if the goalkeeper wants to go, a defender has to drop back. So that rather than saying, I don't want us to ruin the 3-3 structure. I actually think I like the space that it's created. So if you let a forward go with him, it means that you're just bringing more bodies into that zone. Don't do that. But if he wants to go, somebody else has to replace him. So your goalkeeper can still come, but it'll be 11v11 then. That if your goalkeeper wants to come up, another player has to drop back to replace him on the other side. I think I wouldn't be surprised if that's the solution.
Change.
And so you still, an Ethan Rafferty, who is absolutely capable of coming up and doing that, a Sean McNally, a Paddy Dunnican, they would, a Niall Morgan, a Conor Flaherty, they would also get the reward. They could still come up if they want to come up. But it's an even contest then. They have a good defender on them. It's not a 2v1 and you're playing Piggy in the middle that way. So there still is a reward for that. And the reason, you watch back that Kerry game at the weekend, the clip that a lot of people have seen at the very end of it, they were getting hounded in their own half. What did Kerry do in response to that? If they're in training this week, what's their options? Like, does Michael Burns try and break a line there? Or does he say, whatever happens here, we can't lose the ball in our full back line? So he kicks it long. So you see the long kick, you see a contest, a one-on-one contest up the pitch. Because even if you're going to lose the ball up there, you're losing it away from your goal. And that's the game that I want to see. Like this is my own perspective on it. But if we get as close to that as possible, I think we're moving in the right direction.
I don't know if it encourages the goalkeeper to get up the field, which is what it seems they're trying to do at the moment. Not everybody's successful in doing it. In that Ethan Rafferty, Niall Morgan and these lads, they are capable of doing so. But whether they would do risk versus reward then if it's still going to be man on man, the reason you're doing it now is because you have an extra man when you do it. I think less teams would do it. Some teams might do it. But I think that press is potentially coming in to cut out the 12v11. I think that might be coming in as a result of, okay, let's not allow them to get a 12v11. Let's try and press them here and fight for the ball up here. One, for a turnover up the field, which is going to be more likely for a score, but also to prevent them getting up there where they can have time and space on the ball. And we were talking about outside. That's the first time I've seen a team employ that tactic. And I think it's crazy that this is the first team that's done so. Because if you think about it, and I know Robbie Brennan probably touched on it, the game is set up in a way like basketball is set up at the moment. And the major way that you would prevent your star players having time and space on the ball is with a full court press, now a full pitch press. So I think more teams are going to try to employ that. And with the changes, do you think it might be too soon for changes now in the middle of the league? Should they stick with what they're doing for now? Or are there some rules that you would like to see change going into the rest of the games?
A few of them, like obvious ones, I think. I would probably I think the penalty for the 3v3 is just too much. Like, to get a 2-point swing just because one man's went 5 yards and ran back, I think it's too much. I would rather let the play develop. If the team doesn't get a score, then you get like an indirect free or something, you get the ball back instead. I just think, look, we've been shafted. We lost one game and there was a 4-point swing for that. And it was like, as I think it was Kieran McGeaney said, it just doesn't match in terms of like the crime and the penalty. The goalkeeper one, I'm still torn. Like, I really don't know. Like, I think if you stop the goalkeeper coming up, it means we can defend that arc even easier. And so we're definitely going to sit in and because there's going to be no overlap. As Petey says, I think teams are going to start to realise that a full court press up the pitch is the best option, because then it is man v man. I think there's probably less risk than there is if you go man v man in your defence, because then there's 1v1s, and if you get Shane Walsh in a 1v1 with anyone, he's going to beat them to be a score. So yeah, I think that one's the only one's really jumping out at me that's I would change now.
The other question is that I would pose around the 12v11 is some teams, not very many, but Donegal are handling the 12v11 by setting traps and setting up their defence in a different way to how other defences are. You see them bait the attack down one side of the field and then treat them like just
fake press,
square them and cut off all space. They actually leave players undefended on the opposite side of the field and kind of call the bluff and say, you're not going to kick past it over there because you don't have the skill set to do so. So it is possible to defend it, but it's one of the reasons probably scores are down in Division 1 is defences are better in Division 1 than in Division 2, which we spoke about earlier as well. Like, they have completely adopted these new rules and are running with them and playing real attacking football. And the question that I would ask is, to the people that are giving out or being cynical about the rule changes, are they not enjoying the games in Division 2? Because every game I've watched, I've thought was phenomenal.
And look, I mean,
I'm not accusing you as well.
But on that basic point, like I think part of this process, what we're trying to do in Gaelic football, is that people point out little improvements that you can make along the way. And so, like, there's no harm in somebody saying this is the things that I would improve or not. Now, the Robbie Brennan one is different to me. It's not necessarily saying these are the rules I'd fix or switch. It's the whole process, basically. And I do struggle with the idea that the suggestion that we need no change whatsoever. Like, I don't think that's if you look at the mandate that the Football Review Committee had, I think if any stakeholder in the game, the overwhelming majority were in favour of change, of trying something. Rule changes happen in every single sport consistently in some cases. There's a long history of rule changes in Gaelic football before this year as well. There's been previous Football Review Committees, which they've referenced. Eugene McGee, in 2012, was over one that saw the introduction of the black card. So this stuff has been happening and should happen. Those changes, I think, or those suggestions, or whatever you want to call it, those criticisms are part of it. And everybody is open to that. But similarly, you're free to engage. That's one of the great things about this. Like, you're free to make criticisms. Other people are free to engage them as well. If you can defend your point, great. If not, then maybe you shouldn't say it. But that's definitely part of it. I do think, just to wrap a bow on that, there's no mechanism within the GAA to make proper rule change. It doesn't exist. Like, we didn't have a sufficient testing ground. I remember covering fresher games, lads, where you're in Dangan in a storm and you're trying to judge a kick-out rule, which has just have no bearing to what's coming down the tracks. And there isn't the first relation of what we're going to see coming down here. So in that really difficult environment, which is you can only make rule changes every 5 years, we don't have a sufficient testing ground, we have people who are naturally reluctant to change, a lot of good stuff has happened. I don't know you can dismiss that either. I'm not saying it's been perfect, but definitely there has been progress made.
Just to touch on before we move on, Robbie Brennan's comments, because we mentioned them a lot. So in summation, he said, listen, my honest opinion is they've lost the run of what we're trying to do. The whole idea here was to try and protect the game, and we are not doing that. That's not Gaelic football. You turn on your phone and it's 17-0 to somebody. It's a joke, to be honest, with you the way it's gone. It's a mix of outdoor basketball with a breeze, soccer-style defending with 11 behind the ball in zonal stuff. And we'll cut it there. It does go on, but he's not happy, which was surprising because his team has been employing tactics that have been new and have adapted to the rules, and they've been going well. So I didn't expect to hear it from him, but you are going to hear it. And just a final thing that you said there is we're looking for perfect. And I think that is the major issue in the whole thing, is we're consistently looking for perfect. And while we're on the point of perfect here, it might be useful to go through that Westmeath Hooter incident with Meath, because whether that went in after the Hooter, whether it was kicked at the Hooter, whether it was 3 seconds, whether it was a millisecond, I think the fundamental issue is we are seeking perfect in a game that's going to be imperfect. We're trying to take onus off the referees to make judgment calls. And I believe the simple solution to that Hooter is keep the stoppages in the game, keep the Hooter if you want, but when time is up, once the ball goes dead, not a free kick, not a foul or a flagrant foul or any sort of foul to try and stop the game, but once the ball goes out of play, game over. Takes it away from the referee. You still can have the stoppage so that teams don't kill the game, and you still can have excitement in going and looking for that goal like they did at the weekend, Meath, and they got it.
Kind of punishes really good defending though. Like, say if we're set up and we're defending really well, constantly like stopping them from getting a scoring opportunity for minutes, but they just can keep going until they get a shot away. Like, that could go on.
Yeah, I'd let go on. Because eventually, what's going to happen is what happened, as you said, at the weekend. You're going to get tired. They're going to get tired. There's going to be a challenge and a contest for the ball, like you want to see, Maurice. And eventually, somebody's going to have to call the other's bluff and take a shot on. And I think the only alternative is to go back to what we had, where the ref is just having control of the game. You're adding on minutes, but I don't know if they want to go back to that. I don't know if it's in the best interest of the game, but maybe you have a different opinion.
Well, I was at one of the very early sandbox games in Cusack Park for this, and a couple of the Clare lads had just before the All-Ireland final. It was a challenge game between two Clare clubs. They actually played for tickets to the All-Ireland final. There was a lad from Armagh playing for Darragh, so you can imagine he was gung-ho trying to win it. But at the very end of the game, they did a Q&A with the players and members of the Football Review Committee, and somebody asked Jim Gavin about this Hooter thing. Why won't they let it? The Hooter goes and you get one final play, like rugby. And the point was made that if it's a one-score game and the Hooter goes, is that a signal to every single referee in the country, play for a draw here? You know, they have the ball, they have one final chance here, and it's just a subconscious thing, but you're definitely more liable to allow them to get their chance. I mean, I don't see that issue in other sports which have a similar concept, so I don't necessarily think so. I also think the West Meath example, it's so fine. Like if you, part of the issue, I'm sure we'll talk about later, is that people haven't seen the footage of what we're talking about here. But I mean, it is milliseconds, you know, whether or not the ball left is booed as the Hooter sounded or not. So maybe to take away that really nuanced grey area, you just say it's going to be one final play and let it play out that way. But they're simple tweaks, you know. We're not. And just to go back to one thing you said there as well, like I do think when we're designing rules, there should be space for a team to be defensive. Like if they want to sit in, they absolutely can sit in. The thing that I'm getting at is that there's not a reward for the teams who actually want to be courageous. Like the teams who want to press out, I completely accept your point about in the opposition's half. And you're seeing a lot of the fundamentals of pressing, like teams are getting much better at cutting the imaginary line, cheating off the guy who's on the weak side, you know, tucking on ball side, getting really good at getting that squeeze on there. But I think if they want to do that all over the pitch, especially now the kickouts are going as long as they are, very hard to get a press on when, you know, if a ball is breaking around midfield and you're starting to get back there. So teams will, if my version comes in, teams will get back. I have no doubt about that. But there is a reward for the teams who want to squeeze up as well. And that's where I think we're trying to get to.
Let's touch on kickouts then, because if you watch Dublin Armagh at the weekend, there was an incident, I suppose, in that Evan Comerford was pretty harshly called for the 20 seconds. Now, it's pretty clear to me, at least I think it's clear, that what they're trying to encourage is contests in the air for the ball. So the reason that they have it as 20 seconds, which is really, really short, is because they're trying to encourage the goalkeeper to just launch it. And as Ethan Rafferty says, you only have the opportunity to go short in a couple of pockets, and you can only go short if it's immediate. I don't know if we take away 12v11 plus the kick out as a skill, if goalkeepers are going to be rewarded for good play as much. And I understand what they're trying to do, but I think it's a bit harsh in that where the kick out is taken from to have it as 20 seconds, maybe they should change it to 20 seconds from when the ball is teed or something like that. But that is one rule change that I think they are going to change.
I don't think that would work because the keeper would just waste time getting it to the tee.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's when the time is wasted.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, the keeper's not really, once they have the ball in the cone, they're not thinking about wasting time.
Yeah.
They're thinking about getting the ball away. I think just common sense is what's needed when it comes to time wasting.
So if we increase that to 30 seconds, would that be fairer, do you reckon?
I don't think you can have a time limit on kickouts. I think like the referee can see if someone's time wasting or if they're not.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
What do you think of the kick-out rule generally?
As a big man, as in like the arc?
Yeah.
I actually like it. I think if you bring it back to what it was before, we're going to go back to that control, get them away short, build play slowly, not as much contests. We actually, against Sligo at the weekend, I thought majority kickouts are going long here, like all the time now. Like teams are going to, the press is going to be too good. But Sligo actually had a new guy in nets and he picked us off 10 times on a short kick out because he was just incredibly brave. Like there was boys standing way out in the pockets. He'd be like pretending he's going long and then he'd just ping one straight to the boy's chest. He didn't mess up one. And then I was starting to think like there's going to be reward for the most creative keepers as well who can get away short. Yeah. The defenders who can find that space. There is still a bit of space and I think there is going to be the option for teams to mix it up, provided that I think the weather plays a huge part in that too. Like a few of the other games, like the week before against Offaly for us, the conditions were shocking. Like there was no way you were going to risk a short. But the other night there was no breeze, it was dry, and the option was there. So maybe we'll start to see that variability come into the summer when the weather is a bit better. But I like contested kickouts around the middle. personally, from an enjoyment perspective as a player, I've definitely enjoyed the game more when the ball's been going long more often. Like previously, it was get this ball away short every single time. Bill, you're just running up and down the pitch, barely touching the ball.
Yeah, see, I mean, I think that's like it's a brilliant explanation of why we need podcasts like this. We hear a player giving an answer like that. But Malik O'Rourke, after the game in Tuam yesterday, Tyrone manager after the Galway game, who was on the original FRC, and it came up for a couple of years, made the case to bring back the old kickout. And his interesting logic, right? So what you're seeing a lot now is that, as Darragh expertly outlined there, teams are kicking long, often to a box, there's a real contest for the ball there. So it's a lot of breaking ball, like that's dictating a lot of games. And his point is that if you brought back the old kick out, you'd stretch the pitch so that immediately some teams would go short, but other teams would press them up high. And if you lose the ball there close to your goal, you're in serious trouble. So as a result of that, there is the option to go short and you would stretch the pitch, but teams would still go long more often than not. But when they're going long, it's not to a box of 8 or 10 bodies. It might be a 1v1 or a 2v2, in which case you actually get more high fielding. So I know it's twisted logic, but by bringing back the option to go short, you would actually see more high fielding than what we're seeing now. It is definitely I hope you're right. Like I genuinely hope we see more variety and that teams develop that more. But it's the rule I thought I'd love most and I'm most unsure about now is definitely when the wind is strong and you're just seeing lads, everything is going long to a box and it's just breaking ball. And the thing I don't want to see is a referee comes along and starts policing it to the ends, and your lads are engaging before the ball's in the air and you're seeing free after free after free, which is not. I think Malik said Brian Kennedy was getting mauled in the middle, which understandably he's a big man. But so I think it's an interesting conversation about if that's something that if they went back to the short kickouts with the 3v3, so you'd still have to have, those lads have to be doing something. So why not let them press a kick out, try and trap a team up there if they go short, and if they go long, you might see a bit more clean contest in the middle.
Yeah, that's a good variance to the rule, I would say. There are still teams going short though. They're few and far between, but there are teams going short, and when they do get pressed, they're in trouble as well.
And that point about the wind is massive. Like it's just not Shane Ryan got a lot of criticism for not going short against Dublin that Saturday night. He had zero option. He went short 12 times against Mayo at the weekend. Now that's because Mayo are trying to trap them high, obviously, but he's willing to. You're walking a fine line there. Like, we'll get it off short, and if we get out, great. If you don't, you're in trouble. There's a bit of a nice risk and reward to that as well.
I don't see how it benefits the game to be blown for 20-second rulings. So I don't think it does. I think, as I heard on the way up, I think referees are being told going into the weekend a couple of things to be really stringent on because they're not liking it, and then they're penalising them quite a bit. And we had the conversation a few weeks ago that they're going to be really strict on some rules initially because they want to implement them and there's such wholesale changes, but hopefully they'll ease off and start seeing a little bit more common sense as time goes on, and they will get more experience with this stuff and what benefits a good game. The referees that referee a good game as well, they will get more of the big games, so it's in their interest to do that. And
just on that point very briefly, generally in GAA, I think I actually detest how often we talk about referees. Like I think it's so boring. I often think it's a pundit's way when they don't have any interesting to say about a game. Just talk about the referee, and you can roll out the same old cliches that, he was harsh on one team, or talk about random decisions that, in my opinion, there's way more interesting things happening in games than to be talking referees. But in the context of the new rules, when you see a referee who, like Sean Hurston refereed the game in Castlebar on Saturday, is somebody who is strict on the stuff he should be strict on. So he's strict on steps, which if you're strict on steps, the impact that has on me as a forward just now on the defender, when I know if he overcarries this ball, I'm going to get it back. And the defender knows if I overcarry this, I'm in danger. So he's more willing to get it out, is massive. But
you're going to take me out of a job here now, so be careful.
He allows a level of physicality, which is so important. Like, he allows teams to make robust, technically good tackles in the middle, which lends itself to the sport that we want to see. So I think that if you watch that game, anybody who, and I know again, real frustration that people can't watch that game back, but for anybody who can watch it back and is able to see that nature of it, what that does for the game is massive. Like the difference in a referee who allows a team to tackle hard and how it immediately incentivizes teams to press high. Can you imagine, for example, I'm not saying this, but if one of the rule changes was we brought in an AFL tackle, immediately, right? If that's me or that's you, I'm hunting you down all over the pitch and I'm getting this up away because he's going to come and he's going to drag me to the floor. So you would have lads chasing everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I'm not saying do that, but if we had a more robust tackle, the incentive that gets to chase the team down is massive.
And that's what James McCarthy was advocating for last year.
Yeah,
as well.
brilliant interview, yeah.
Like, the only thing I would say is most of the referees are pretty okay on the steps rule. It's the comment that I get on all my videos all the time because I slow it down and it's like, steps, he's after taking it out there. But they need to change the rule from steps, I think, to time or a beat, because usually those steps happen so fast, the referee can't actually count them at all. It's usually like 1, 2, 3, 4. He has to take a solo or a hop or whatever. And I think that policing that in a lenient way is going to lead to a positive appraisal or a positive outlook on the sport, because like I get a lot of views on the videos that I do break down, and if you look at Cormac Costello at the weekend where he is using the solo, he's using the hop, Shane Walsh any week, like that is something that people want to see. So I don't know if being stricter on steps from my perspective is a positive thing. Maybe it is a positive thing for the sport though in terms of contests.
Well, I when people do that, I think that you're misunderstanding it. Like that example is, there was a Sean Bugler one last year, which was a particularly egregious example. But I'm kind of reluctant to bring it up in those situations because it's a positive attack and play. Like it's somebody breaking in on goal. It's not necessarily, what I mean more so is all over the pitch, and it's just to plant the idea in the players' heads that there is a danger that I'm going to be pinged for overcarrying the ball, which incentivizes them to move it quicker or maybe to kick it longer to get it away from their goal, and it incentivizes the opposition to press up more. So there's a middle ground to it too.
Does that not, like personally as a player, if I have the ball and I know it's going to be really strict in steps, I'm less likely to take my man on?
There's a danger of that too, but what I would hopefully happen is that rather than saying I'm in danger of not taking my man on, I have a man right up behind me here, so I need to beat him, or I need to go direct, that there'd be a bit more direct ball. Like there is, your point about the 20 seconds thing, the thing for me that is most frustrating about that is that you're asking the referee to count something that he's got no help doing. So he's got, I know Ethan Rafferty was right. There was really harsh examples in that Dublin Armagh game, but lads, try it. Like try and count 20 seconds without looking at a watch, on top of doing everything else as well. You're putting the referee in an impossible position. So just get rid of it. Like
I stopped it. I paused it, rewinded it, and then counted it out on the clock, and it was still too close, like the call. And then I was like, I had the thought, I was like, what am I doing here? Like this doesn't benefit the game at all.
Just make their lives that small bit easier. So I'm not saying every single tackle has to be 4 steps or you're blown, because you're not going to watch everything else. But if there was the idea that you were in danger of overcarrying the ball, I do think it would have a positive impact on the game. I
get you. And I think it comes back to the thing that we're looking for a perfect game, where it's an imperfect, chaotic game, is what we actually want. So sometimes I think fans don't know what they want, because we're getting a lot of the things that we did want, and it still seems to be majorly negative and critical, a lot of the comments. And that's what was frustrating me as somebody that speaks about it a lot. Is like, hang on a second, I haven't really, I've watched one game this year where I've said, Jesus, I didn't really enjoy watching that game. The rest of them have been, by and large, pretty good. And we might as well move away from rule changes or enhancements as we move on, but we will probably touch on them as we go. But there was a couple of incidents in the Tyrone and Galway game, and you were at that game, that were talk about incidents. But the major thing that came out of that was it was good to see both teams back to full complement and playing attacking brand of football. And there were a couple of highlights in that game, like having Peter Hart back and that kick pass he gave into Darragh Canavan. That was just quality, like. And that's what we want to see.
Yeah, one of those rare examples where you're sitting in a stand and you're like, I hope that's as good when I watch it back, and it's actually better. Like it was just an absolute peach of a ball. And that's, Galway are one of those teams actually were really getting after pressing high, and it definitely incentivizes the opposition to kick a bit more. Tyrone kicked a lot of ball. Yes, like there was 2 advanced marks in that game. Brian Kennedy caught the ball that he fouled for the penalty. He caught that on the edge of the square. So you are starting to see, teams try and get a bit more direct in it. I thought it was a brilliant game. And I kind of hate the idea that Darragh was framing them in their new rules. So this is the last thing I'm going to say about the rules. But
no, we will cover it more, I'd say.
But I think it was a fear when people were changing the game. Are we kind of sterilizing it? Like, are we, you have to hand the ball back. You're not allowed to talk to the referee, a lot of stuff like this. And this game was in Tuam Stadium. It's just it's a real kind of real and raw stadium. The only thing they care about is pure football. So the pitch is perfect and the stadium isn't ideal, but it's exactly what you want it to be. It is just so authentic, and it's really kind of Cowboys and Indian stuff. Like, it is a brilliant place to host a game like that. And I have to say, when you're there, the game is still wild. Like, we haven't stripped that core emotion from it that you still want to see. You still want to see a sideline going absolutely mental. And first time I think I've been at a Division 1 game where management were actually punished for dissent, but there was a real kind of a raucous atmosphere around it. And you saw that with, I mean, it's like when Shane Walsh is in that kind of form, you'd feel so sorry for Niall Devlin. Did such a brilliant job on him, like for so long in that game, and then he's isolated, no more than you said, 1-on-1 in front of the stand against the wind, and he just absolutely tears past him, kicks a savage point into the wind. He's kicking 2-pointers. I think he's 23 2-pointers at the minute. And then, you know, no more than at the very end of the game, completely insane circumstances. Like, there's in the 58th minute, Tyrone win a penalty. Peter Tay gets a black card, comes off. The game is stopped 5 minutes later because Galway's manager are going nuts because Tyrone only have 2 up, forgetting about the black card. So Brendan Cawley eventually realises, oh, hang on, actually they were allowed to keep 2. Play resumes. Manny Donnelly kicks a 2-pointer, put them 2 points up. Peter Tay comes back on, but he's a fullback. So goes back into the fullback line. Yeah. Play restarts. They don't have their 3 up, and they can see it at 2-point free, which Shane drills into the win. So there was a lot in it that
he had length on that as well. It had a lot to spare going over.
Yeah, and I heard you talk about this a couple of weeks ago in relation to the Donnelly interview about, you know, you don't realise when you're putting yourself on the pitch and you're not fit, nobody else necessarily realises it, and you're going to be judged on very limited terms. But the clearest difference you're going to see in Shane Walsh's fitness in 2025 versus last year is the fact he's kicking frees off the ground. Yeah. He didn't do it. He couldn't do it last year. He actually, like, it's my understanding Shane tore his quad against Mayo in the first league game last year. That was the injury that he had, like so a really serious tear in his quad, and he's battling that for the year, which is why he stopped kicking off the ground. So he's getting, I don't know if you remember, he's getting pelters in All-Ireland final because he kicked a free on his left foot into the hill. He kicked it there because Rob Finney was gone off injured, and he couldn't kick it off the ground off his right because of this injury. That's the reality. Now he knows, nobody else knows that context. He's going to be judged on the nature of it. But when he's fit and when he's able to kick off the ground like he is, like that, against a stiff wind, it's such a brilliant thing to see. Like, it's exactly the thing that you want to see rewarded in the game.
And people will be saying, sure, what's the difference? But there is more force going through your quad, more rotation, kicking off the ground than there is out of hand. So, like, obviously it's going to have an impact. And also, a point on Shane Walsh is he is in the form now, having had that dealt with, because everything that he does to take on players is so low to the ground, so quaddy, he needs to be on the ground. So he needs to be able to generate a high amount of force in a short amount of time, especially when he's slamming on the brakes. But now when he has the ball this year, as opposed to last year, I had a post about it a couple of weeks ago, he's dictating the tempo of the game so well because he's so comfortable that he has so many movement options available to him that he's just, okay, I'm just going to wait, kind of bait the defender in, and then I'm gone because my acceleration is at a greater level than anybody. My deceleration is also there. But also, if I get a yard on this fella, I'm going to knock it over from distance. So it's been a joy to watch him so far, really.
Just on that point, like, where you're judged, like, over the last couple of years, obviously with me coming back, the groin, and you nearly, like, I definitely been playing, I don't know what percentage of what I'm capable of, but like the difference that makes in what you can do in a game is huge. And like, you nearly convince yourself, you can still have the same performance and stuff. But if you take 10-20% off your ability to accelerate, change direction, sprint at max velocity, kick off your right foot, kick off your left foot, like, your performance level dips so much. And that's probably what you were seeing with Shane last year. He's probably even frustrated himself. I'd say he was probably not getting out for any, additional skill sessions, not getting out for shooting before sessions, probably having to miss sessions midweek, and then everyone's talking about how last year he's way off. Why is this man way off? But again, it comes back to that. Players don't speak. No one has a clue what's going on. And so everyone just thinks Shane Walsh is useless. But really, that's what was going on under the hood of it. And that's going on in most county teams in Ireland. Like, you would be surprised how many players within all the teams are battling, whether it's tendinopathies, groin issues, anything that's limiting their ability to train at max output, develop their skills, and play to their max, I suppose.
Especially now as well, with the changes in the rules as well as the duration of the games, The movement demands have changed, so they're covering more distance. The games are longer, balls in play longer as well. So the teams that are doing well in the league seem to be rotating players really, really well. And Galway are one of those.
Yeah, and I mean, and just on that point, like there's I think a misgiving oftentimes in GA commentary is we overestimate tactical or strategic decisions and underestimate like the core point about availability. Like, so you and I'm guilty of it myself. I'm watching like, this is a way different Tyrone team to the Tyrone team I saw in Armagh. I covered that game as well. And then you're like, well, it might be a different team because Darragh Hannon and Peter Hart are back there, and that maybe they didn't necessarily change grand scale tactically. Or Galway are a better team now because Shane Walsh and Sean Kelly are actually fit rather than what they're playing last year. So there definitely is an element of that you just you latch on to the narrative as opposed to the reality of that. Makes a big difference when lads are back and fit and available. That your point is definitely true. Like there will inevitably be a need for greater depth, and you're seeing teams really start to develop that. And that's where I don't know, the Galway have the best 15 in the country now, but their depth is absolutely unbelievable at the minute. Like that's the one thing that they really have, and that's a credit to management, and it's a credit to, I think you see that in a lot of counties where if you give management consistency, no more than Kieran McGeeney and Armagh, they're allowed to develop a panel. So you see lads who have been there for 3 or 4 years, maybe not necessarily making a mark. Like was Thomas McCormick in the Armagh panel for the last 3 years before we actually see him play it? And sure, is it any surprise that he looks ready-made when he finally does get his chance, that he had that consistent exposure? But that only comes when you've got a manager who's willing to, or is allowed to be a bit more long-term in how they approach it.
I think that's the hardest part of management as well, and coaching, keeping players happy that aren't playing.
Oh, definitely.
And the guys that are the best in the country are the ones that are able to do that, as you just said. Like, if you're not playing as well, as a player, if you're not communicated with, you take it as a hit, as, okay, well, I'm not good enough to play.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how McGeeney's done that, to be honest. Because I know Tomas McCormick has been about for 3-4 years. I suppose it's different when you're involved in a setup that is pushing for All Irelands and pushing to be, like, Armagh came from Division 3 not that long ago, so they've been on an upward trajectory for a long time, and I know they've been in Division 1 for a while now, and probably it took them a while to really kick on. But when you have that overall goal, and it's probably a case of McGeeney talking about winning All Irelands for the last 5 years, and boys in the squad going, well, I'm not fucking leaving now because there is a potential of us winning All Ireland, and I don't care if I'm number 28 or 9, like an All Ireland medal is an All Ireland medal, whereas you're in Division 3, you're not getting any minutes, the team might be struggling, and you're thinking, what is the point? And then you've got everyone else in your ear saying, why are you bothering going out and wasting your time there, which is even more common in, I think, probably lower level counties. So it's not as easy to just adopt that approach in the lower level counties, I think, as it is in a team that has those ambitions of pushing on and winning All Irelands.
So what do we think about increasing the amount of substitutes then? Because my perspective anyway is that players will adapt to it. So I don't know if you want to be bringing on fresh players all the time, nor will every county have that depth to do so. The teams with the depth will end up winning. But at the same time, you're going to have a huge amount of injuries, which we have seen, and the severity of injuries are going up because of the movement demands, because players were prepared previously to play a different sport to what it is now. So maybe there should be some sort of grey area where they are allowing more substitutes in the league now or for this season than they did previously. But then you'd be saying, well, if they're doing it now, why would we not just keep it for longer? What do you think?
This is such a boring answer. I'm conscious of that just before I even say it. But we haven't got the data from 9 months. So there's a couple of different bodies that have been set up as part of this as well. One of them is looking at the physical demands of the games. They have GPS data from every single team. They haven't produced their first report yet. So until we get that, a lot of this should be steered by, I know it's, again, I'm conscious that it's not a thing that people care about, but it should be steered by the data. Like, it should be steered by, if we're seeing, there is an injury monitoring group already in the GAA. So if they come back and we see this GPS data, which hopefully we were all assumed we were going to get it last week. We didn't. Hopefully we get it this week. And that react to that, as opposed to the vibes and this kind of stuff. I think the same thing is true for what we were talking about, rule changes earlier. Like look at the actual data. What is the impact of the 12v11? How many times are we seeing teams use it, and to what extent are they using it for control? And then make your change. But I don't think it should be necessarily on a whim, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get you.
On the load demands, like, people have been throwing out 20%.
Yeah.
I've seen the data. I have the data from this year. I have the data from previous years, and it's not up as much as people think it is. Maybe in Division 1, like I'm watching Division 1 games and thinking that game's that game's definitely being played at a faster pace than we are in Division 3. So potentially it is up.
And is it up?
It's
Average intensity is up, I think. Though.
It's not that much.
Really?
Yeah. From what I can see anyway.
I was under the impression average intensity was up, high speed running was up, and as a result of that, potentially the maximal intensity wasn't at the same level because they're covering more volume. Now, you're speaking players' perspective, you're speaking writers' perspective. I'm going to go S&C perspective. I'm always getting anxious here at the call to get all this data together, because I know compiling the data for the team for a season is a big job. Compiling all of the data from every team over the course of all of the games is a huge job. So I would bear with them on that, because, geez, if I had to do that, I'd give up every other job I had, to be honest.
Are you aware of what the data was previously in terms of high speed run in a game, distance in a game?
Yeah, well, like from other years.
What would you say would have been average high speed run of a game before?
My perspective would be more club than county, to be fair, but typically you're seeing at club level in Dublin, at least, the majority of your players, difference again, league to championship, are well over 1,000 high speed running meters.
A 5.5 meters per second?
Yeah, GPS Stat Sports.
Yeah, well, it's some, like, the thing is, right, and this was the same before, you're always going to have 3 or 4 players who are hitting like upwards of 1,500, close to 2,000. You're still seeing that, but you're also still seeing 3 or 4 who's around 1,000, maybe below 1,000, just above.
Inside players?
No.
Depends.
Not because there's a bit of rotation going on. But from what I can see, like, it's the average is still similar.
Anecdotally then, from your perspective, in terms of the conversations we've had around cramping and whatnot, do you find that your higher intensity actions are closer together, like the density has increased because the ball and play time is higher and the speed of the game has gone up?
In terms of how I feel in a game, I don't notice that much. Like, if I think back to games before when I might have played like wing out forward in the old rules where it was just up and down, like, my memory is I was more fucked before than I feel at the minute. The reason for that is because, well, I suppose like the kickouts are a big thing in terms of the ball's going long and it's just a contest in the middle. So, yeah, in terms of how I feel there, it's like more collisions and knocks and bangs you're taking in games, which I've been noticing. And then in terms of the calf cramps, like we talked about this before, like I would have got calf cramps anyway, and often had to be taken off 10 minutes to go because they were completely gone. Whereas I've got through a few games this year, just about. But
there might be a difference in Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. We'll have a look. But from watching the Dublin game at the weekend, I would obviously have more investment in the likes of Keane Murphy from Thomas Davis. And there were a number of instances in that game where the ball was turned over, transitioning quickly, and Keane just took off. And knowing Keane's injury history, every time that happened, I was like blessing myself. And like saying like, oh Jesus, hopefully he does well. And a shout out to him as well, because he was doing, and he always does, a huge amount of work around the field. But like the repeated sprint efforts from him in that game in particular, to my eye, because I can't see the data, was really, really high. Now, knowing how he looks after himself, prepares, etc., he's able to tolerate it. But that comes back to the Donegal Dublin game where Dublin had those 3 injuries. And the conversation being around the movement demands haven't changed and whatnot. Like, there has to be some sort of a difference. And as well as that, I was actually at a course at the weekend around hamstrings, and we all know that the severity of hamstring injuries has gone up in the last decade due to the nature of all of the players outputting far higher outputs than the players of yesteryear.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking there of last year with Galway and with the old rules, they had like 15 to 20 injuries, whereas this year they've got minimal.
Yeah.
So like,
there's so many factors.
I think that's a deadly point, and like this is not my area of expertise, obviously, but I do think there's, far be it for me to tell them what to do. But just for example, like if I was to give you a case study from that Dublin game, so they played Donegal on a Saturday, they played a game on the previous Saturday, so Cunbascal played all the full game on the Saturday. Played a Sigerson game for TUD midweek, and then he played the Donegal game again on the following Saturday. He played a Six game the Thursday before that Saturday game as well. So you're talking about in 10 days, he played 4 games. So no, I don't know, but I would have loved to ask Dessie Farrell, are you absolutely confident he did his hamstring because of the new rules, or might have been because of his load? Did he need to play that game against Donegal?
It's both, though. It's always going to be both.
I'm sure that's,
I 100% agree with that. I think there's a bigger problem than the demands that are placed on players within a game. I think still training demands, like S&C's coaches need to adapt, and I still think most teams probably train too hard during the week. And then the obvious point of Sigerson games being planted in the middle. Like we had the same, we had 2 or 3 lads who were playing 4 games in the space of 2 or 3 weeks. Like no matter what demands or within a game, that is too much. Like
but from an S&C coach's perspective, then what I would say is it's very rare that you will say to management, look, this fella needs limited minutes, and they say. Now I've been in cases where it has always happened, and I've been in cases where it hasn't happened. But there's so many variables as well, and sometimes teams will use the league not for the nature of trying to win the league, as we might touch on, but preparing for championship. So they might push their players and push their team into a period of overreaching in order to prepare them for the intensity that's going to come down the line. So with any injury, it can't really be predicted. Now we will look at managing load and look at acute to chronic work rate ratios and then try and pull back. It doesn't always happen. But definitely if you're playing 4 games within 2 weeks this early in the season, like I would just have a red flag around it probably.
Yeah, and again, as I say, like let's just be steered by the data on this. You know, when we see it, I think that first report will. You know, you made a very good point there. Like I know there's people like me are very frustrated where we're told we're going to get these reports and then they don't come. But I'm sure the work that goes on behind the scenes to actually get them together is a nightmare. So you maybe give them a bit of leeway. But when we do get it, we can react to it then. No more than, I mean, I think this was the Games Intelligence Unit, the first statistical report that came out a couple of weeks ago. A brilliant thing, like an absolutely savage thing. But still is a limited sample size. You're talking about less than 48 games. Comparing championship data to league data is not ideal. Like it makes it a difficult enough comparison. The fact that it's happening is great, but I wouldn't overreact to it either. I think you just gotta see the trends and we'll be leeway with it, but not, we can get caught up in the idea that scores are massively up, and then you look at it and like actually they're not that massive up. Or you can get caught up in the idea that is there that big a difference in the kick out, and then you see the actual data and sure the change is incredible in terms of how many are contested and how many are going long. So your eye can lie to you too. I let this stuff. Let's see what comes back whenever we get that 9-1 report.
To wrap up then, we did want to touch a bit on GAA Plus and what's at the disposal of the GAA. And one of the major issues and one of the major whys behind the podcast is trying to give more access to players, have more conversations with players. We are still running into issues with getting access to players and having chats. Why is it, do you feel, Maurice, that needs to change in order to continue to get the same attendances or greater attendances, greater eyeballs on the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I can feel kind of a tedious enough conversation because journalists often make the point that we would like to hear more from players, but I go back to the core idea is that when you do hear from them, it benefits the sport. There's indisputable data about that. I think it benefits them. So like I work 2 games at the weekends. Galway, in terms of media relations, are brilliant to deal with. So after the game, you speak to a manager, and then basically, I mean, I spoke to Sean Kelly, Cian Darcy, and Shane Walsh afterwards, and you'll hear those interviews over the next couple of days. And I mean, you hear Shane talk about those injury difficulties that he had last year. I think when people realise the extent to which he was struggling, it might put in a bit of context, and they might give him a bit more leeway than they do anyway. So it definitely stands to the player themselves, and I mean this from an understanding perspective. Whatever you want to say about their personal brand and stuff like that, that's a relevant conversation as well. But for, like, we can't, I mean us, everybody, like we can't afford to be complacent about the place the GAA holds in our national consciousness. That just because it has been our national sport and it gets the eyeballs it gets, doesn't mean that will always be the case. And there are very simple ways of ensuring that, of just safeguarding against that. That doesn't have to be interviews, but it could be something as simple as if we got accurate team sheets. I heard you talking about Michael Murphy's return against Armagh. Can you imagine if everybody knew that Michael Murphy was actually going to play that game, but he wasn't in the listed team sheets? Like, would it have added 1,000 people to the gate?
Full house, I'd say.
Simple stuff like that I think would go a long way towards safeguarding the sport's position that we, I genuinely believe this. We've got a brilliant product. We've got an absolutely lethal sport. Why don't we celebrate that properly? And hopefully what we're starting to see, this is an optimistic outlook on it, but I think what we have now is a mechanism to properly celebrate it. So what this Games Intelligence Unit was, like, the reason I'm so excited by it is not the report. The report is great. Like, I'm not dismissing that at all. But it's what happened there was that every single team agreed to share their footage. And you have a team of analysts sitting down and they're tagging every single event in these games. So what that means is that if I'm sitting, as I hopefully somebody is, sitting in the GAA and saying, geez, Fermanagh have scored some savage scores over the last couple of weeks, I can go into this, I'll export every score, and you can produce a video and you'll celebrate what Fermanagh are doing. As it happens, they've got a very smart analyst there anyway who does this already. He puts up the highlights for Fermanagh scores and you can see him. So that's why I was able to watch the scores from the Fermanagh game the last weekend. But can you imagine what that would mean for the Waterford footballers who, is there a young lad playing football in Waterford who's ever seen his team on TV or celebrated in that way? So there's a wider picture here about how we celebrate our sport. Players are part of that, and hearing from them is definitely part of that. But for me, there's a bigger picture, which I hope we're not complacent about that. Like, I hope we realise what we could actually achieve if there's just a small bit of creativity and a bit of courage. I do think you're asking people to be a bit more willing to sit down and talk to you about this kind of stuff, or to share their footage or whatever it is, because the reward is obvious.
Yeah. And I think a big thing on that is people like to consume media in different ways. So the younger generation might like the short form clips, the TikToks, the Instagrams. Other people maybe might want to watch like shorter form highlights. Other people might want to watch longer form highlights. And other people might just want to watch the raw footage of the entire game. I don't think it's that much work for the GAA in order to present that on a weekly basis. And I know that they'd say, well, look, it's on Allianz League Sunday. But what you get on Allianz League Sunday is a great product for the people that want that. But you get 20 minutes on a Division 1 game, 20 minutes on it again, then you get a bit of hurling, and then here is 14 games in 3 minutes and what happened in each of them. And like, sure, you're seeing a little bit, but you're not really getting much insight into any of those games. The amount of feedback we got on our insight behind the Antrim Fermanagh one, like, people have an appetite for this stuff. So we just need to put it together.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Even as a player, like, you obviously, it makes it better for us knowing that what you do in a game is potentially going to be shown if you play well, if you don't. And you, like, previously there was like so little recognition. You'd be maybe shown in the Sunday game once every 2 years. Well, championship, yeah, you get on it, but league, I'd say I could count in one hand how many Fermanagh League games have been shown in Sunday games since I've started playing nearly. Well, probably an exaggeration, but in the last couple of years anyway. So it's definitely something that people want to see, even just within their own county. Like, what we're probably trying to do is like our support probably isn't great. So we kind of want to give something where people can watch and say, geez, they're actually going well. That looks like something that I want to go and see. Whereas they might just see a result, they lost by 3 points. Oh, fucking useless again. So yeah, I hope that's what we're kind of trying to get out of it. And it's probably the same with other smaller counties. Like, we're just trying to get people wanting to see the game and coming and supporting their county.
Right, to wrap up, lads, we'll do the good, the bad, and the ugly from the weekend. The good, for me, Keane Murphy's transitional play, I would say. And then I was also happy to see Jack O'Neill playing for Galway, because he's been out. He had an ACL surgery that was rehabbed to not the degree to play intercounty football, but he got a score. And then Shane Walsh's,
he was deadly.
Shane Walsh's free at the end as well was just immense. Anything else to add, lads?
Fermanagh's comeback, it's really good.
Yeah, just on, when you mentioned Jack, there's Galway have an unbelievable ability to get lads into the squad and to, like, lads with like good quality footballers, but who've got massive ceilings, and they developed them. Like, if you look at the improvement in John Maher since he went into the Galway setup, it's absolutely Cian Darcy, like another one who's just, how he has elevated himself. Jack is in a similar mode. Like, I watched Jack play for James's when his brother Sam and Paul Conroy were playing midfield, and like, this guy is a good quality club player, and he's winning kickouts, he's scoring in his debut for Galway. Like, it's an unbelievable ability that they have to, and it's, Darragh's point earlier about how do you keep those lads happy, like, on the extended panel. And I think it's a cultural thing. Like, it's an environment thing where you have, I remember Darragh Joyce, who you've spoken to in the past, telling me a story where, he couldn't get into the St Kilda team, and he was trying, but he's a particularly vocal key forward who mightn't have been as big a fan of the Irish players and was on his case a bit. And Darragh just decided, I'm marking this guy in training every single day. and I'm going to make his life misery. Like, I'm going to go to town here and make sure everything he gets, he's going to earn. That same fella went to St Kilda's management. It's like, how are you not paying this fella? Have you seen what he's doing to me in training? And that's how he got his debut. He convinced him by purely that process. But that's by a team recognising, this fella has burst himself here, like a teammate recognising it. Why can't he get in? I'm going to help him get in. So that's down to your environment. The final thing for the good, I'm delighted to see that we're seeing players more willing to have a go. Like the Ryan O'Donoghue's sideline we mentioned earlier, but like that is just if that's one of the small positives we get out of this, what a brilliant thing to see more of that. So I'm encouraged by a lot of that we're seeing just a bit more risk in that balance we talked about earlier.
Colin Reese scored a class point as well outside the boot in the early stages of that, so we'll give you a shout out to that. In terms of bad, I would say the 20-second ruling and the fallout afterwards, how it was policed and whatnot. I know they want more contests, but we just probably need a bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, agreed. Another week, and you're seeing it this weekend as well. If we could get a small bit of wiggle room in the league, like just a week gap between league finals and championship starting is just, I think you're seeing teams who aren't as interested, definitely in Division 1, in making a league final. So if we could, it's our best competition. If we could give it the platform that it deserves, I think that would be great.
The ugly then, I'll go for the hooter. And the issue there, that was probably avoidable, but that's probably one of our better podcasts in that we've had far more good to talk about than the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, that's all I can really think of in terms of the ugly. It's not even that it's ugly, like it was just a case of blurred lines in terms of what, I think, did the referees even know what they were looking for in that situation? Like, was it clear?
It's up to the referee, I would say, discretion, whether he's kicked it or not kicked it. That's a personal perspective.
Just highlights the fact that it's that the way it's being ruled can't stay, because it's mad that actually happened, like, already. Like, it's just a small chance of that actually happening, but
it's a good thing it happened as well, because it won't happen further on.
But there's examples where this is the nature of the league, comes so fast that people forget about it. I covered Tyrone Armagh in the athletic grounds, Armagh's first game since winning the All-Ireland at home, and you know, they were well up, but at the very last kick of the game, Michael Parna went for a 2-pointer, dropped in the square, Rafferty punched it, went over the bar, and so it was a 1-pointer. So the score goes up on the scoreboard, 19. We all write our copy, send it off. We notice somebody from the referee's team run out to talk to RTE, and then the scoreboard changes. This is 15 minutes after the game was stopped. So what happened there, right? Michael McCarron took the shot on the hooter, got the shot off before the hooter. Rafferty touched it after the hooter. So it can't be a 2-pointer, but because Rafferty touched it after the hooter, the point is gone as well. So it wasn't a 2 or it wasn't a 1. So the point was taken off the board. Now that was missed, I think, but can you imagine if an Ulster final was decided by that? So if the fact that we are going to iron out that sort of stuff, I think is a good thing that to come from, is that we are still in what are we calling this, a trial window.
Yeah. But it's a good trial window. I'm enjoying it. So, Maurice, thanks a million for joining us. Thanks for making the effort, and thanks for colour coordinating as well. But we'll be back again, hopefully in a couple of weeks, with some more content around the GAA and another Backdoor Cup podcast.